This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome back to episode 78 of A Geek Leader podcast, and today on the show we've got Jeff Haden. Jeff Haden is the best-selling author of Motivation Myth. He's also a contributing editor and writer for Inc. magazine, probably one of their best, our most read authors, gets shared all the time on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram, and he talks a lot about leadership and his career of moving up the ladder and the myth that we all fall into when it comes to motivation. So with that being said, give it up for Jeff Haden. Okay, so today on the show we have Jeff Haden. He's the author of The Motivation Myth. How's it going, Jeff?
Good. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, so I've been listening to your book on Audible, and I've really enjoyed it. I just want to ask you, what inspired you to write a book about motivation, and how did that get started?
Depends on whether you have an hour or I'll go the short version.
All right.
Probably the best way to look at it is, where it really started is I was talking to Venus Williams, which, if you're going to drop a name, Venus is a good name to drop. And it struck me that at no time was she talking about this one moment where she decided, I want to be Wimbledon champion or number one tennis player in the world. Or because she does other stuff, like she runs an interior design company, that was never like oh my gosh, I want to do that. She also has a fitness wear company. There was never this moment of, I got this lightning bolt that said, here's what I want to be, and therefore I have all the motivation I need to get there. She just had something she was interested in, and she started working to learn more about it and get better at it. And that process provided continual doses of motivation. So I thought about a lot of the other really successful people that I'm fortunate enough to talk to, and none of them had that lightning bolt moment. They were always just, this seemed interesting to me. Let me try it. Let me see if I can get better at it. And through that process of trying, seeing a little bit of improvement, that feels good because we always like to feel like we're improving at something, which gives you a little bit of motivation to get to the next day to keep trying. That created that cool little feedback loop that allowed them for over long periods of time to get those tiny little doses of motivation that kept them going. So I contrasted that. I promise I'm almost done. I contrasted that with all of the people that write to me or talk to me after I speak or wherever I am that say, I feel stuck. I can't find my thing. I can't seem to find the motivation. And they're all waiting for this thing to hit them from outside. And the successful people don't wait for it and also don't need it to get started. They just say, I'm interested in this. Let me explore it. Let me create a process that allows me to get a little better at it and learn about it. And that creates that feedback loop that I just described. So that was really the start of wanting to write it, is that you don't have to have some special something inside you, and you don't have to receive this special something from outside of you in order to get motivation. You can create it on your own just through the active effort and then enjoying the achievement that you have.
Yeah, I've heard so many times where people will say, well, I get this great app idea. I'm just not motivated to start coding it or to start building it. Or, I have this, I don't know how you are motivated to go out and run. I have no desire to do that. It doesn't motivate me, but I want to get in shape. I guess that kind of plays into what you're saying, is that they haven't seen that lightning bolt that struck them and said, hey, here's your motivation to go do this.
Well, one, I would say that if you have this great idea for an app, but you don't have the motivation to develop it, then either one, you don't have a great idea, or two, you don't really want to do that. And most people that have something they say they want to do are actually trying to do it. Otherwise, you don't really want to do it. It just seems like something you should do, or it seems like something you would want to do.
Or maybe you're just wanting to impress someone.
Right. Or they try to force it and they say, okay, back in the early days of creating apps, when it seemed like, every other story you read was about a guy that spent a weekend and a half working on his app, and then he made $300,000 in 2 months. You saw those all the time. So somebody probably said, oh, that seems like a great idea. I'd love to have $300,000 in 2 months. But you don't really have the idea, and you don't really have the interest or the motivation to actually work on it. So I probably took you farther away from that than you want it to be. But that really is what it boils down to. But the flip side of that is that you don't have to have something that you are dying to do in order to have motivation to do it. And the great example, which if you say you listen to my book, my stupid 100,000 push-ups I did in 1 year.
Yeah.
I wasn't motivated to do that. It was a dumb goal. There was no.
What was that, 200?
300
and 200 and something a day?
It was 347 a day. I'm sorry, 374.
Wow.
It was 147 on the sit-ups because I also did 50,000 sit-ups, but I repressed that whole experience because I hate sit-ups.
And you actually did one more push-up than you had to do?
Yeah, that was stupid too. But anyway, if you think about SMART goals, that acronym where a goal is supposed to be meaningful, that's the M. There was no meaning whatsoever in the 100,000 push-ups. I just decided it would be really cool for myself to be able to look back someday and say, I did 100,000 push-ups in a year. I just thought that would be kind of fun. And I also wanted to prove to myself that I could stay disciplined to do that. So I got going, and it's 374 a day, 200, whatever. The math is now eluding me. It's 274. But I would do 300 a day just to have a little bit of a buffer. And at first it sucked, and then it sucked a little bit less. And then it became a game because I was playing how quickly can I get them done today? Or, how many reps can I do per set? Or, and I was just trying to improve in little different ways. And it actually got to be weirdly fun. Not fun, but weirdly fun. And it became part of my identity that year of I do push-ups every day. And so I would always find time to knock out my push-ups. It didn't take very long by the time I was done. I was doing the push-ups and sit-ups together. I could finish in about 20 minutes. So it's not that big of a deal. And it wasn't that big of a time commitment. But it was really cool to do. And so the point of that is you can even take something that you don't think you like. And the same is true with me for cycling, which I also read about in the book. Hated it at first. But then as you go into it and you get a little bit better at it, you start to like it because we always like things that we think we do well. And we tend to dislike things that we don't think we do well. And so you can learn to like something, oddly enough, just by the process of improvement. And you also learn a little bit about it. You learn more about, like with cycling, I learned more about nutrition. I learned more about cardio stuff. I learned about equipment. I met some really cool people. So it turned out to be a really neat thing, but I had no real desire to do it. I just wanted to get in better shape, and I couldn't run anymore because my knees are a disaster, and cycling seemed like something I could do. So that's another part of this, is that you don't even have to really like or love the thing you are starting to do. You can actually find a passion for it through the process of working at it and trying to become better.
Yeah, no, I think I can relate to that because it's probably been 8-9 years ago now. A friend of mine who he runs all these ultra marathons, he convinced me that it was a good idea for me to try to run a marathon. And part of the way he convinced me was to have me go ahead and sign up with him. So I signed up, and I was like, well, I've already paid the money, so now I've got to do it. And I hated running. Like that first mile was miserable. And, probably half a mile in, I was out of breath. My lungs were on fire. It was just miserable. But we went through the couch to 5K to start with, and then moved on from there and continued to go through it. And I'd say probably by like week 15 or 16, I was just excited to go running. And I felt like this sense of accomplishment, like I had achieved so much.
And the key is,
so I kind of can relate.
The key to that also is the hard part about that first day. Like you said, that first mile was awful. If you're training to run a marathon and you haven't run before much, then that first mile that you set out to run that first day is awful. And if you pick your head up and look across the distance and say, all right, this first mile was death, and I got to do 26 of these, then most people will quit at that point because the distance between here and there is just too freaking great. And it's insurmountable and it's defeating. But if you just stick to, like you were doing the couch to 5K thing, that had a process, I'm sure, for here's what you do today, here's what you do tomorrow, we're going to build. And if you just focus on what do I need to do today? If I accomplish what I needed to do today, I get to feel good about myself because I did what I set out to do. If you compare yourself today to where you someday need to be, you will always lose that comparison. and you are always going to feel bad about yourself. But if you just rein it in and say, what do I need to do today? Did I do it? If I did, I get to feel good. That's awesome. And then tomorrow you will have a little bit of motivation to keep going because you felt good about it yesterday. So, and then at some point you do get down the road and you've, like you said, you can go do 15 miles. It feels really cool. You feel good about yourself. Then it takes on its own little life because now you've become a runner and you've gotten somewhere and you can see that there that you need to get to is achievable and you have it in you. And then you're in a really awesome place. But that early on, the key is just to stay to, what do I need to do today? Let me focus on that. Let me check that off. And that will keep you going.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think you can relate those principles that you just mentioned and talked about back to technical leadership, because when I first became a manager, one of the things that I had to do or needed to do was to have one-on-ones with my team. And I don't like confrontation. I don't like that, intimate conversation, but it's something that you need to do. And kind of once you start doing it, then you feel good. You feel like you've achieved something. And I think you can apply that to the basic things that you need to do to manage and lead people.
Sure. Well, I think this isn't quite what you were just talking about, but I think one of the things, it is kind of, one of the things that I hate about a typical onboarding process where a new employee comes in, if you think about it, if you're getting ready to start a new job, you're excited, you're motivated, you want to do well, you want to make your mark, you want to get things done. It's an exciting time when you first start a job. And so you walk in the door and the typical place, you spend the first day in HR filling out a bunch of forms and doing your paperwork and getting your tax stuff ready and all of that junk. Okay, so you don't really accomplish anything the first day. Second day, you meet with some people, you get some kind of orientation, they tell you about the company, you go through this canned thing, which they're usually really boring. So the second day, you haven't really accomplished anything either. Third day, you wander around, you meet people in different departments, they give you an overview of what they do, because they're trying to make you feel part of the team, which is an admirable goal, but you haven't really accomplished anything then either. And usually by the end of the week, you have been at work for a week, but you haven't actually done anything. And that has blunted that feeling of, wow, I'm fired up. I really want to get going. I would really want to accomplish things. So when I'm asked, I always tell people in your onboarding process, find a way that the new employee can do something the first day, even if it's a small slice of their job, even if it's a fairly small thing. Create some space where they can actually show some of the skills that they are proud that they possess and that you hired them for, so they can start to get that little feedback loop going of my effort equals an achievement, makes me motivated, makes me want to come to work tomorrow and get fired up and roll on again. Because if you go a week or so and they haven't gotten to do anything, and then they haven't gotten to do anything that you can say, hey, great job, which is important too. It's pretty sucky if great job just means great job hanging in there through orientation. That's nobody's going to feel good about that. But if you get to start to give them positive feedback based on actual achievements that they have made, then you're also creating that really cool dynamic too. So the same process works if you're leading people. As soon as you can, give them things that they can succeed at so that you can tell them that they did well, but also so that they get to feel good about themselves, because that is motivating.
That actually brings me to one point and one question that I want to ask. To your point, I heard, I think it was Dan Pink talking about like the number one reason why people quit their jobs is because they don't feel like they make a difference, like they're not making an impact at all. And if you start your first, let's say 2 weeks of work and you're just doing, onboarding and you haven't actually done anything, I can definitely see how that motivation is zapped from you because you haven't made a difference. You haven't made an impact at all.
And then all of a sudden there's this moment where you have to transition from, I was a vegetable for 2 weeks to, okay, now let's go. And that's a hard shift to make because you have been in that mode of, let me meet people and, let me become part of the team and all of those stuff. All of those, again, are admirable things, but I think you can become part of the team through time and effort just as easily as you can through individual meetings and going to lunch with different employees and stuff like that. If you think about the best teams you've ever worked on, you felt good about the team because together you guys were able to do a lot of stuff. You didn't feel good necessarily because you guys were great at lunch. that doesn't, winning, like in sports, they always say that, winning cures everything. And the best chemistry comes from winning, not from chemistry. And it's the same with teams. So give people a chance to actually achieve something early on. And then the cool thing is, like you were talking earlier about how it's hard to have those one-on-ones sometimes as a manager. It's really easy to have a one-on-one conversation with an employee if what you are doing is saying, hey, you did great at, and then you are able to be specific about what they did well. Not just the little drive-by that you do at the end of the day where it's like, hey, good job, thanks, which is fun. But if you're able to say, hey, great job doing X, Y, and Z, that's a really easy conversation. And then if you do have to have those conversations once in a while where it's like, X and Y didn't work out as well as we were hoping. What can we do to make that better? That's an easier conversation because you've built that dynamic of, I will tell you good things, and occasionally I'm going to have to tell you constructive things, but it's okay because we're in this together.
Yeah, I want to also hit on, you said it a couple times right there and before about saying great job and kind of rewarding your team. And I think one thing that you hit on that I've seen so many companies that have like celebrations and rewards for things that don't seem significant. And for me, whenever I got like congratulated for something that I thought was just insignificant, it made me feel even less valuable. And it didn't motivate me at all. And that's just anniversaries. Oh, it's your first, you survived a year. Here's, here's an award.
Right.
Instead of like, well, okay, but what else did I do? Congratulate me on something that I actually did.
Yeah, I worked in a plant where we knew that on the third Tuesday of every month, the plant manager was going to cruise through our department and chat us up. And it had to have been on his calendar. That was just how it went. So it was third Tuesday every time. And he would walk by and he would have little platitudes and he would pat you on the back. And, I worked in book manufacturing. And so he'd walk by and we did this to him on purpose, but he would walk by and say, how's it going? And we would just say something. We would always say, making books. And he would go, that's how we pay the rent. And he would do that all around the plant. And that was our joke. He was like, how many times can we get him to say that's how we pay the rent when he's here today? But it was meaningless, and it was actually a joke, and it made you feel less like a valuable employee than if he had not shown up at all, because it was just rote. But if you can come by and say, specifically, here's what you did well, and it shows that you noticed, then that makes people feel really good. And that also goes back to the point you made early on about if people don't feel like they add value or they are meaningfully contributing, then they tend to leave. Well, if you can pick out something that someone did well that they didn't think you noticed, that's the perfect way to make them feel like they matter. Because it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize he knew I did that. That's pretty cool. Because attention is a big metric for employees in terms of how they evaluate how you treat them as a manager. The more attention you give, it doesn't have to be volume, but it has to be like depth, if that makes sense. So if I notice something you did that you didn't think I would notice, then I'm paying attention. And that's a really cool thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's one of the things when you hear about people talk about employee engagement, they're engaged when their boss, is engaged with them. If they have an ignoring boss, then they're more likely to, disengage from the work that they're doing and be less motivated to actually do anything.
Sure.
But all a boss has to do is just, like you said, comment on one thing that they didn't think that you would notice.
And if you're trying to show the person that they matter, then add on one extra layer and say why that made such a difference. So if you stayed late today to help get an order out that, was late, if I can say, hey, thanks for staying an extra 30. It was great that went out on time today. And I know that's going to make a difference for the customer because so-and-so. Well, then now they've got a sense of not only that they did well at some metric, but they also made a difference in someone else's life, whether it's professional or personal. And then that makes you feel good too. So
yeah, that's
the key. Yeah, exactly. And so then I can connect my effort to an outcome for a person, not just for a target or a spreadsheet or, some chart that shows up on the wall.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I think there's that's some of the key things in motivation is getting started. After you get started, having that success after success that kind of builds along the way, and then adding purpose to it. What's the purpose behind this is a great way to motivate those around you. How else can we motivate the employees that work for us as a leader? What are some things that we can do maybe specifically to kind of nudge someone that doesn't seem to be engaged in their job right now?
I would say the biggest thing, and it's something else I talk about in my book for individuals, but it also works for employees, is the whole idea of serial achievement, where let's see, how can I make this not too long-winded? I haven't shown any ability to be non-long-winded yet, so let's give it a go. I think we're all capable of doing a lot more than one thing. So if you hire an employee to do a specific task or role, that's great, and they may have those skills, but you should immediately start thinking about how you can help them develop other skills or other talents or work in some other role somewhere down the line, because they will eventually want to. And, now, especially with the pace that things change, specialized knowledge is only valuable for some short period of time, and then you get left behind. And so if you are creating people who are helping people develop the ability to do this well, and then do that well, and then do another thing well, not only do they feel like there's a future and that they are continuing to grow, but also you get a better organization out of it as well. And it's pretty exciting to come to work when you know that you are seen as someone who is capable of doing more than you are currently doing, and that people are actively helping you to gain those skills to be able to do more than you are currently doing. That's an exciting thing. It also gives you a sense of purpose. It also shows you matter, and it's also motivation to try to learn new stuff and develop new skills, because there is a value to doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you also talk about in your book is about process. You should focus on process over the goals. But at most companies and most, even myself, I do this too, is I set annual goals or goals for my team members or goals that we want to achieve this year. How can I kind of shift the thinking to think more about processes instead of those goals? Well,
it's really not so much shift as it is just add that layer. Mm-hmm. To me, goals are important, and you have to have them. I'm not saying ignore goals, but when you set a goal, like we'll use you in your marathon example, your goal was to run a marathon. Okay, that's cool, but you can't sit there all day and just focus on, I want to run a marathon someday. I want to run a marathon someday, because it doesn't help you. So when you have your goal, then your goal informs the process that you will put in place that will allow you to achieve it. That's what's really important about the goal is, okay, I want to get to there, so what process do I need that ensures that I will get to there? And so you went through and you had a process basically that was going to get you to your marathon. So if it's a business thing, if your target is, we want to do 10 million in sales this year, that's cool. What is the process that will allow you to get to 10 million a year, and what metrics along the way show you whether you're tracking properly, whether you're doing the right things, whether you need to adapt, whether you need to adjust. The process is what you do every day that will help you get there. So you're really not doing the wrong thing by having goals, but if all you focus on is this is my goal and you have a fuzzy process, you're really not likely to get to the goal. And wishing and hoping and wanting is not going to get you there, but process will get you there. And that's where I think most people fall short. And then the other reason that you would fall short is you say, I want to run a marathon, but I want my process to be something I like. Usually if you have a really hard goal to achieve, some of the stuff that you have to do, you are not going to love. You can learn to enjoy it, but for a while it's going to be hard. And that's part of the deal. And so the key is to not say, well, I'm individual, I'm special, I'm unique, so therefore my process needs to be just unique to me. Most of the time, people around you, all you have to do is look around and see who has accomplished something you want to accomplish, and then look at the process they used to get there. And for a while, you copy that. And maybe you change a few things as you get experience and you have data that shows you that you should make a change. But in large part, there are perfectly good wheels out there. You don't need to reinvent them. And I think that's really empowering. Some people see that as, oh, wow, that's limiting. But I think that's really empowering, because if you say, if you do these things for this many months, you will achieve this. And if I want to achieve that, I'm delighted, because I know what I will do will get me there. I do not want to spend 6 months putting effort in and not achieving something when I could have put 6 months in and actually achieved it. So which would you rather have?
No, I think you're absolutely right that if you just look at someone that's where you want to be and follow their process, well, eventually you're going to get there, or at least get close. And some people say, I've had people tell me, well, oh, that's just copying someone else. I'm like, no, it's not copying. No, it's following their framework.
Yeah. Well, I don't even care if it's copying. Who cares? Does it matter if, we'll use the marathon example, does it matter if you use the same training program that your friend who has now run, say, 10 marathons used to run his first marathon? Does it matter if you copy his program and you run a marathon? You still ran the marathon, and there's no issue of plagiarism because there's no copyright to that. You ran a marathon. How you figured out how to do it, you can either make it really hard on yourself or you can make it really easy on yourself. And I would prefer to put the effort into the process, not the effort into coming up with this brand new individual thing that only applies to me.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that's what a lot of people need to think about. If you just follow the framework, when it comes to leadership too, there's so many books out there. There's so many podcasts and audiobooks and things that you can just follow the steps and do the things that are uncomfortable, that are difficult. It'll get you to where you want to be.
If you pick someone, if it's a leadership thing, if you're struggling with something, and like you said earlier, you don't like confrontation, with you, hate confrontation. And I hated that as a leader, but I happened to be in a situation one time where I saw how a person above me on the food chain handled a certain situation. And I thought, that was probably hard, but that was really smooth. And the outcome was good. And ultimately what you want is not for you to be comfortable in that situation. What you want is for the outcome to be what you're hoping for. If you have to have some discomfort along the way, but say you get an employee to a better place, then if that was your goal, that's what you want. And so I looked at what he did and I thought, wow. And so from then on, that's how I handled that type of situation. Was I copying? Sure. But it worked. And it didn't matter. And it didn't matter to the employee because if they got to a better place, that was good too. So look around and see how people do things and just steal. That's the way to go. Because there are plenty of people out there. Or you can turn the flip side and you could say, and this probably happens more often than the good examples, you watch somebody handle something and say, ooh, that was a disaster. I'm not going to do it that way, but here's what that person did wrong, and here's how I can adapt that, and then roll on. But the end result of all this is your job as a leader is to serve the people that are reporting to you. It's not to serve yourself. And so if you are unwilling to do the things you have to do, and learn the things you have to learn to serve the people that work for you, then you shouldn't be in the role. But don't feel bad because it's uncomfortable or because it's painful or because you hesitate sometimes. Don't feel bad for that stuff because everybody else feels the same way. They may not show it, but it happens to everybody and it's okay. But time and practice will get you to a place where it gets to be a lot easier. And you'll be a lot better at it too, which, the two actually go hand in hand. The better you get, the easier it gets.
Interesting. So I want to shift gears just a little bit. With your career, you've been able to talk to some of the coolest people in the world. I was wondering if you could just tell us one story of a great leader or someone that you've talked to that was just very interesting, that kind of has a memory in your mind that you think would be interesting to our audience.
Okay. I promise this is going somewhere, so work with me. So I was going to do, Richard Branson was in New York and I was in New York for the day, and he was promoting a documentary of, do you know that he did those like balloon things over the Atlantic and the Pacific where he took a hot air balloon and flew all the way across the Pacific? He and another guy were the first people to do that. But they had many misadventures along the way. And as opposed to the quasi near-death experiences that you hear about, they were in a very perilous situation. And so there's a documentary about it, and it's actually really good. And so I was set to interview him about that. And I talked to him before, but I was there for that. And the way those things usually work is you get lined up with a group of other people who are also going to be interviewing him. And it's almost like planes waiting to land. You're in formation and they hustle you in. And so I was one of the last actually, I was the last one to come in. And I could tell he was kind of tired and he'd had a long day because he'd gone for a run with some school kids earlier and he'd done a bunch of stuff. And so he was kind of tired, and one of his aides brought in his lunch because I think he'd asked for it. He brought him a sandwich and a drink, and, he sits there and he looks at it, and I started to talk, and he said, I don't remember this exactly, but this is basically how it went. He said, I don't think I could eat in front of you. I feel bad. And I said, oh, man, don't worry about that. I actually took my lunch to an interview one time, like a job interview, which is a whole nother story. But don't feel bad. I get it. It's okay. I'm just glad that I am getting the chance to chat with you, dive in. And so he sits there for a second. He says, no, I really can't. And he starts to slide it aside. And I'm like, no, I didn't say dude, but it was, in effect, I was saying, dude, it's okay. Go for it. And he said, no. He said, well, I really do want to eat that. The only way that I could do this is if you will share my lunch with me. And so he gets another plate and gives me half his sandwich. So I think I took like 2 bites, and he eats and whatever. But while that seems like a silly story, what I think is interesting there is that here's a guy who can talk to any journalist, media person, whatever, at any time he wants to. Richard Branson is, if you're thinking of gets with quotes around that, Richard Branson is one of the gets of all gets. He's the guy that you want to talk to. So here he is. He's doing that. He's a billionaire. He's got all these things going on. And yet he's also a guy who's sitting in front of me and thinks, it's rude to eat in front of someone else, and I don't want to do that. And I thought, all right, so you can do all these other things and you can be all these other things, but yet you can still be true to who you are, and you can still want to be the person that you want to be, and you don't have to be changed by all that stuff. And I thought that was just a cool moment, but also it does tell you something about leadership, because no matter how far up the ladder you go, you are still a person, and you do still need to treat people like people, and you need to remember that you're not perfect and that you don't have all the answers, and that every decision you make isn't going to be right, and that's okay. And if you admit that and are a little bit vulnerable and manage to be humble, you will get much farther in how you lead people than if you just become, the king of the castle, or, or the captain of industry, or whatever term you want to use. So I thought that was really cool, and it is a nice reminder that if I ever get full of myself, which rarely happens, but if I ever do get a little full of myself, it is a nice reminder that, okay, if Richard Branson's not full of himself, I probably should chill out a little bit. So hopefully that was a decent story.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm definitely a fan of Richard Branson. I remember I read his book, The Virgin Way, and I think you mentioned the balloons in that book.
And I got one more. I promise I can tell quick. You want another one?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'm at an Inc. conference where, people come. It's like any other conference. Mark Cuban was going to speak. He's in the green room waiting to go on stage. There's, hundreds of people out there all waiting for Mark. And there was this young man that was guarding, quote unquote, the green room door. He didn't have to guard, but he was an intern that was basically there for free. He volunteered. And the setup was that the volunteers were going to get to rotate through different positions. And at some point they'd get to be in the hall, with a role, but then they could listen to the speakers and stuff. So that was kind of the quid pro quo. But he'd gotten stuck as the green room guard all day. And I noticed him there all day. And so I had talked to him a couple times because he seemed pretty lonely. And we saw this commotion at the end of the hallway. And he said, what's that? And I said, well, I think that's Mark Cuban. There's local TV here and they're doing some stuff. And he said, oh, if I could just meet Mark Cuban, how awesome would that be? And I said, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. So Mark comes in, cruises by, goes in the green room, and I can see this kid's face. It just kind of falls, and he's disappointed because he was hoping to at least shake his hand or something. He didn't get to. So I go inside and I talk to Mark, and there's all these people around him and stuff. And then somebody pops their head in the door and says, Mark, we're a little late. You need to get on stage right now. So he's heading towards the door with this entourage around him, not his, but other people at the conference. One cool aside, he only had one guy with him, whereas Papa John, he had like 6 people with him, and 2 of them were security guards. Why Papa John needs security, I don't know, but that's another subject. So Cuban's walking out. They're all hustling him out, and I thought, oh, heck with it. I'm going to do it. And so I stopped him and said, Mark, there's a kid outside. He's been stuck in this job all day, dying to meet you. Can you just say hi to him on your way by? And I see all these people look at me with daggers in their eyes, because I'm holding things up and he's late to get to the stage. And, Cuban, I think, notices that, but he says, yeah, no problem. So he walks over, shakes the kid's hand, takes a picture with him, chats with him for a few minutes. Of course, this kid's in heaven. The people around are all looking at me like, what have you done? And I'm like, oh, sorry. And so then he hustles on by. And I thought, okay, here's a guy who took time to, he could have cruised on by. He's obviously bigger than anyone there. He could have rolled on by, but, somebody wanted to meet him. Here's a kid who's been stuck outside all day. He's going to take a second. He's going to make his day. And actually, the picture he took with him, he puts his arm around the guy, and it's a nice big smile, and it looks genuine. And every other picture I saw him take with other people were a lot less casual and a lot less friendly looking, because he's just going to stand there and get his picture taken. And I just thought that was a really cool thing. And it's a human moment of, you may be somebody, but you can make somebody else's day just by taking a second and treating them like a person instead of like someone who is there to support whatever function you run. So from a leadership point of view, sometimes those moments of I'm actually just going to treat you like a person and not like an employee, even if you're treated like a valued employee, that makes a huge difference to people. And it's something that they remember, possibly for the rest of their lives. But it only takes a few seconds to make a big difference in someone's life.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, you never know what that person's going through either at that moment. It may be such a big impact on their life that sends them in a totally different direction that, you have no idea what the effect is going to be.
Yeah, you don't. And that's the cool thing. And you don't even have to care because what you know is that you took your shot. You did something nice just because you could. And if it pays benefits for that person, that's great. If it doesn't really make a difference, that's okay too. You tried, and that's all you can do. And that's cool.
Yep.
If you only do things because you know they will make a big impact, then you're probably not going to do very many things. But if you do it just because you can, then who knows what will happen.
No, that's really good information. I think you're absolutely right. If you only do the things that you know will have an impact, you're not going to get anything done.
Nope. Nope.
You got to take the shot.
Yep, take the shots.
Before we leave for the day, I want to ask you two more questions, I guess you would. One is you mentioned in the book that you some people use motivation as an excuse. They're just not motivated. And I think we kind of hit on that when we talked about, you have to kind of get started and see the success build into the next success. But you also talked about that you don't really need a coach to get you motivated. You need a pro. What do you mean by that?
Let's see. I promise I'll try to be brief. I talk in paragraphs, not in sentences. Sorry. One of the things I also did, I decided that I wanted to get into cycling. And so, like you signed up for a marathon just to have that target out there. Well, I decided I was going to ride this Gran Fondo, which is their mass participation cycling events. And this one was 102 miles and 11,000 feet of climbing. It's like hot death. And I hadn't ridden a bike, so I had 4 months to train, which was not very long. So I could have gone to the gym and talked to a personal trainer there and said, okay, here's my goal, here's my whatever. And that person would have said, what are your interests? What do you like to do? What time do you have to a lot to it, a lot of that stuff. And they would have created this little program that suited what I was willing to do, which probably would not have gotten me there. But that's what they're trained to do because they're trying to work with you. The flip side of that is I actually talked to the guy whose event it was, and he's a professional mountain biker and has been for almost 20 years, and he's won national titles and world titles, and he's a stud. And I said, hey, I want to ride your Gran Fondo. How do I get there? And he said, well, if you want to, first you should quit because you're never going to get ready in 4 months. And I said, no, I'm willing. Tell me what to do. And so the first day, my program was to go out. I had to ride for 3 hours, and not just ride for 3 hours, but I had certain things that I needed to do within that time. And it was hot death. But he gave me a clear-eyed, concrete, if this is what you want to do, then this is the real world of what you're going to have to do along the way in order to be able to accomplish it. So I didn't go to someone who had been trained how to teach me to do something, if that makes sense. I went to someone who had done it, knew what it took, knew how it should go, and wasn't going to BS me and wasn't going to give me this soft and fuzzy program, but was going to say, okay, you want to do this? Here's what you need to do. And I think that is almost always the best way to go. If you want to be, if you want to get promoted, you can, get kind of soft, fuzzy advice from people who do career counseling, or you can go to someone who has been promoted a number of times in pretty rapid fashion and say, tell me what you did. How did you do that? What did you do? What you'll probably find out is he or she worked harder than other people, volunteered for more things, whatever it is. But they're going to say, all right, if you want to do that, it's going to be hard, but here's what you have to do. So it kind of goes back to my idea of you don't need to reinvent wheels. You also can go to that person and say, you have accomplished this. Tell me what I need to do. If you were me, what would you do? And you'll get the clear, real world advice that you need, as opposed to the quote unquote coaching that is going to nurture you along the way, if that makes sense. I'm not criticizing coaches. In some cases, it works really well, but a lot of times people will say, like, they're a business coach, but they've never actually started a company and built it to some size. They just know some tools and they have some tool sets that they will help you apply. Well, that's fine, but I would rather hear from the person who bootstrapped her way to a $10 million company, because she'll tell you the real deal and she'll tell you what you need to do. So that's kind of my thing. You don't need to go out and hire a coach or whatever. You can find a pro, and people will work with you if you are sincere in your desire to accomplish what you say you want to accomplish, and if you listen to them. So if I had gone to, the guy's name for cycling is Jeremiah Bishop. If I had gone to Jeremiah and said, hey, I want to ride this, tell me what to do, and he gave me my first week's program, and then he checked in by email and just said how'd it go. And if I'd have said, well, I know the first day was 3 hours, but I only did an hour because I kind of got tired. And I know the second day was to do intervals of so-and-so and so-and-so, but, that didn't really feel good, so I just took an easy ride. Well, if I go through that, he's done. He's not engaged anymore because I'm not willing to do what he's told me to do. So if you are going to go to somebody and ask for advice, before you do it, be willing to take their advice. Don't automatically say, well, okay, I hear you, but, I'm special and unique and I can't do that. Well, yeah, you can. You just don't want to. So be willing to do what they tell you. Give it a fair try. And then after some period of time, if it doesn't work, then you can say, okay, maybe this wasn't right for me. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. But you got to give it a fair shake. And by a fair shake, I don't mean 1 or 2 days. If it's a fitness thing, give it a month. If it's a business thing, give it several months. If it's a career thing, give it several months. So you have something that you can actually use to evaluate your progress and whether or not it does make sense for you. 99% of the time, you will find that you are way farther along than you would have been had you not followed their advice to the letter.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. And I always have that conversation. I've talked to people before where they said, oh, well, I need to get a life coach. I was like, well, make sure you get a life coach that's lived, not someone in their 20s who hasn't lived yet,
I don't even this is an aside, but I hate to say this, but I don't really even understand that life coach idea. I'm not sure what you're looking for. Usually what that means is that you have some specific things that you're struggling with. So why don't you go to people who have done the things you're struggling with and say, hey, can you help me with this? That's the way to go. Not to have somebody who's, just going to sit there and say, rah, rah, go get them. You're awesome. Tell yourself you're awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
None of that self-talk has ever worked for me. The only time I've ever felt good about myself is when I've actually achieved something. And then I can say, ooh, I did that. That feels good. Looking at myself in the mirror and say, you're awesome. I look in the mirror and think, no, you're not. I see what I'm looking at, and no, he's not awesome. So anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry about the life coach aside, but I do wonder about that.
No, I agree 100%. It's just kind of one of those things that I never understood going to for that kind of purpose. I understand, if you want someone to help you interview better, or you want some techniques on communication, you want, very specific skills. Absolutely. Go find someone that can help you out in those areas and teach you. I like the term teacher, and I like your idea of pro too. It made me think of golf, because you don't ever see like golf coaches. You see golf pros that are at the pro shop that are giving the lesson.
And they're going to teach you a specific skill. They're not going to do a bunch of rah-rah stuff. A great example of that, and I promise I'll be done with this, is, I've had people say that they'll come to me and say, when I fire people, it always ends up into this like argument, discussion, and it seems to take half an hour before I get them out of the office and out of the building, and blah, blah, blah. And my advice to them is, if you know you're going to fire the person, if that has been decided, then you just sit down and you say, we'll pretend I'm firing you. John, sorry, got to let you go. If I have done the right stuff along the way, where if we've had the discussions about where you're falling short, if you know what you need to be accomplishing in order to meet the standards of the job, if all of that stuff has been taken care of and you're still not there, we don't need to talk about why I'm letting you go, because you already know. And so then if, John, you decide to argue with me, all I ever did, I finally figured this out, was I would say, John, before you start, I'm happy to listen to whatever you have to say, but you need to know that the decision has been made and you are being terminated. And so usually people would go, and they would sit there for a second and they would say, oh, okay. And then we were done. And while that might sound harsh, all you do when you argue with somebody over the fact you're firing with them is make them feel worse. I mean, what do you get out of that? Because they're trying, and then they feel bad, and then they feel stupid for having argued, and they're mad at you, and all that other stuff. If you're going to fire the person, then there is no discussion you will have that will make you change your mind, or it shouldn't. Otherwise, you shouldn't be firing them. So just say that, but do it in a nice way. And it always worked. So that would be a pro tip that you could borrow from me, as opposed to me sitting around saying, you've really got to summon up your courage, and you've got to have a stiff upper lip, and you got to go in there and feel positive and strong about yourself. And okay, that's all true too. But give me something I can actually use to make the situation go better, and then I will do better at that. So there you go. Sorry, I'm off my soapbox.
No, I think those are all great advices. I like the idea of just ripping the Band-Aid off and getting it over with.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I don't mean that. That's not mean. I never said it mean.
No, I don't think it's mean at all. I think it's the
I tried
nice
to
thing
say
to do.
it in not an apologetic, but in a sympathetic way. Like, hey, I'm happy to listen to you. We can talk about this for as long as you want, but just understand that we have made this decision and it is going to happen. And so I was trying to kind of communicate that. And I never had anybody get mad at me for saying so. So I evidently pulled it off okay. And it did make it a much smoother process. So your job when you fire someone is not to make yourself feel better. Your job is to somehow do it as humanely as you can, and to leave the person with as much dignity as they can have in what is a horrible situation. That's your job. So whatever you can do to make that happen, that's your job, even if it's hard for you.
Very well said. Well, I really appreciate having you on. I enjoy your book. How can people find out more about you and your book?
Well, in the odd chance that they would want to find out more about me, I'm on LinkedIn, and I actually do respond to people. I think I'm lucky enough that I've got, 970,000 followers or something. And I may not respond within 24 hours, but if you have questions or have stuff, I will answer eventually. I'm on Inc. It's Inc.com, and I've got hundreds of articles there. So if you just search me in Inc.com, you'll see a lot of stuff. And my book is available wherever people buy books.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having you on.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Sorry it was a one-sided conversation, but you were gracious enough not to cut me off too much. So thank you.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks.